Hi, I'm Marie Elizabeth Molly, and this is Relationship Alchemy. I am wanting to celebrate with you today that we have reached a huge milestone on the Relationship Alchemy podcast, which is, this is our 100th episode. What? I think that's amazing. I am so excited about the conversations I've gotten to have over the past couple of years with the amazing guests who have come on the show. I've loved watching the show evolve from being strictly on relationship topics to expanding into topics that include how we relate to ourselves, how we relate to money, how we relate to society, our bodies, abundance, all these various things, because everything basically is a relationship. We are in relationship to the world. And all of it needs to be alchemized to have the lives we want. And today I wanted to talk about, because I'm probably not going to do a whole episode on this, but speaking of relationships, our dogs have been a little wild since we got back to California for the summer. In Mexico, they're able to be off leash. We take them to the beach. They're off leash. They don't see a lot of people in our development where we live. And so they just have gotten out of the habit of walking on a leash in the city like they do here. And so Mojo's displaying some leash aggression. There's just a little bit of, they're both barking like crazy at the door. Whenever a neighbor walks down the stairs behind our house where we have a sliding glass door, they go nuts. So we took them the other day for a board and train program. It's with this guy who's been training dogs for over 40 years, and he's really a behaviorist. Like, he understands dog behavior, which when you're picking a trainer, you want to make sure you pick someone that really understands dog psychology, because it's not about trying to apply human principles to these beautiful animal companions that add so much to our lives. It's about really understanding how they think and setting them up to win. And so that's why we picked this particular trainer, because we knew he came from this approach. He understands how dogs think, and he does a lot of trainings of the owners to approach the dogs in a way that the dogs will understand better. And he said something just on the drop-off. So they're going to be with him for like 2 weeks, then we get them back. And then he trains us on how to continue the progress that he's going to make with them. So they're basically a doggy camp. I'm so excited. Our doggies get to be at camp for 2 weeks. And he said something during the drop-off that just blew us both away. It's not that the idea I've never heard before, but it was the alliterative example and the way he said it that just really landed, and I'm never going to forget it. And it made me think about relationships, because I think about relationships a lot, how that could be applied in other ways. So even though he was talking about dogs, I think it applies in lots of situations. So basically, I'm going to tell you about dogs first, and then I'll expand it out. So stay tuned. You're going to love this. What he said is, with a dog, you are either a butler, you're their butler, or their buddy, or their boss. What does that mean? When you're their butler, it means that basically when a dog asks you for something, you give it to them. If they sit, because they know you like to give them, that you give them treats. If they sit, they will sit, so they'll get a treat. Another trainer we worked with years ago said something similar about when a dog comes over to you and asks for affection, if you don't have them do something, so the affection is a reward for what they did, they basically just topped you and made you their butler. So this trainer, I would use his word. So when a dog comes over and asks you for affection and you give it to them without them having to do something, they just made you their butler. They had a desire and you fulfilled it. You are there to fulfill their desires, in a sense, from the dog's perspective, which over time will create a dominating and neurotic dog. Same thing with the buddy. Like, we want to be buddies with our pets, right? I mean, and even pets is a disputable word. I prefer to use the word animal companions. We tend to want to be buddies with them. And it's a similar issue. Dogs are pack animals and they need a leader. And if you are not being the boss, which is the third B, if you're not being the boss, they start to develop anxious and fearful behaviors because the pecking order is not clear and they start feeling like they have to take care of you instead of how it's supposed to be, which is the other way around. So why does this matter? Why was this so revolutionary? First of all, I just loved his 3 Bs. You know, it's so memorable. Am I being a butler, a buddy, or a boss right now? So clear and so easy to know what to correct. In other relationships, obviously, it's not the right relationship with everyone for you to be the boss. So sometimes you are the buddy in certain relationships and sometimes you're the butler in other relationships. The question is to think about when your relationships get funky, is there something happening where the relationship is asking for you to be in a certain role with respect to the relationship? Like the relationship is asking you to be a buddy, but in that moment, you're being a boss. Or the relationship is asking you to be the butler, and in that moment, you're being a buddy. I invite you to consider your relationships, both personal and business, from the perspective that if something feels wonky in it, are you or the other person perhaps trying to occupy a different seat that's not the seat that the relationship is asking for? I know this might sound super abstract. I think I need to repeat something that I've taught in multiple podcast episodes, which I invite you to go back and listen to now that we've crossed the 100 threshold, which is so exciting. I invite you to go back and listen to some earlier ones because they're great. The thing I want to review with you that you may or may not have internalized from earlier episodes is this idea of a relationship existing as a union, as its own entity in a certain way, as its own body, its own thing, independent of you and the other person. So there's you, there's the other person, and then there's the relationship or the union. And sometimes the union is asking something of both of you that you are, one or the other of you is out of alignment with. And that's why the relationship feels funky. So something that Patrick and I do a lot and that I have taught couples how to do is to consider the union. If there's some kind of conflict or some kind of decision that needs to be made, that you're differing, that you have differing opinions about the way forward, then my invitation is to sit side by side, not to sit opposite each other, but which inherently can feel confrontational, but to sit side by side and imagine that the two of you are looking out at the union on the other side of the table. And when you look together at the relationship, at the union, and ask, well, what does the union want here? What does our relationship want here? You might get clarity that you wouldn't otherwise get if you were just looking at, well, I want to do it this way and I want to do it that way, my way or the highway, as we can tend to get. Or just doormatting it and giving it over to the other person, but then being secretly resentful and passive aggressive and sabotaging and all the shit we do behind the scenes when we have abdicated our power. So in order to not go into either of those poles, not to go into my way or the highway, or not to go into the doormat, but rather to find the solution that actually works best for the union, it may be aligned with what one of you wants to do. It may be not aligned with either of your ideas. There might be a third idea that's better that doesn't come to you until both of you are willing to get off your position and look at the union and what would benefit the union the most. And it might be a combination of your two ideas. So all that to say that this piece about the union relates or is a useful underpinning to this question of, in this moment, does the union need me to be a butler, a buddy, or a boss? And when I say the union, I'm talking mostly about romantic relationship, but you can remove the word union, insert the word relationship if we're talking professional stuff or familial stuff, and just say, in this moment, what would serve this relationship best? Not serve the person, because you're not serving the person. You are serving the relationship. What serves a relationship best here? For me to be a butler, a buddy, or a boss. And in that way, I think you can have some really interesting experiments as well as clarity around habitual pitfalls that you might have in one or other of your relationships with people. And you also get to really develop your own skill around showing up in the way that a situation is asking you to show up. There's a lot of power in that, in calibration, as I call it. That's my word. There's a lot of power in learning to calibrate to a certain situation, not chameleon, but calibration. So you're not chameleoning yourself to fit a situation, you are calibrating, which means don't show up to church in your lingerie. There's basic things we do already automatically to calibrate to different situations. And I'm just talking about a deeper level of this and more skill around this. So back to dogs. For example, our first dog, Phoenix, is an anxious just by nature. She was abused before I got her, and I got her a few months before Patrick and I got together, about 6 months or so. And she came incredibly fearful and anxious already. And so much so I had to carry her out to go to the bathroom. She wouldn't even walk through the door. She was so afraid. And this was my first dog, and I didn't really know what to do. I didn't know how to train a dog. I consulted various trainers. They all said, oh my God, she's going to be so hard to train because she's so damaged, she's so traumatized. It's going to be really hard to get her to trust and feel safe. So of course that had me feel insecure. And so what got encoded in our relationship was a kind of, she really needed me to be steady. And I was not in the first few months, for about 3 months, until I began to learn how to steady myself better. And as I learned how to steady myself and actually be a boss, she could settle down. She began to settle down and feel safer. But something really deep got encoded between us where she felt like she had to take care of me. And this is part of the imbalance that she continues to struggle with to this day with her fear level, because she doesn't fully get that I've got her, even though I do. She doesn't fully get that I've got her because of that very early wiring that happened between us. So all that to say, I'm excited that she's going to get to be trained with this brilliant human for the next couple of weeks. And then I'm going to be able to continue the progress and just really convey to her, no, I'm the boss. I've got you. And I'm the boss doesn't mean I'm dominating and you're a peon. I'm the boss means I've got you. That's the true meaning of alpha. Alpha doesn't mean all the dumb shit it's come to mean in our culture. The alpha is the one who looks out for the pack, is the one who has the care for the pack. So that's my celebration of 100 episodes. I invite you to consider this idea of how are you showing up in your relationships with the humans? And if you have dogs, that's a valuable inquiry. How are you showing up with the dogs? And if your dogs are acting out, what this guy said is over the past 20 years, he's noticed this uptick of fear-based, wonky shenanigans among dogs because we have become, we want to be their buddies. And we end up being their butlers because they train us to give them treats for things we shouldn't be getting treats for, like sitting, basic shit that they should just do because they know how to listen. So I invite you to play with this idea of, am I being a butler? Am I being a buddy? Am I being a boss? And what's appropriate to the situation? How do I want to be? And play with that. Happy 100 episodes, and look forward to seeing you next week. We'll continue as usual next week with some more guests. And thank you again for listening. I wouldn't be here without you. So I appreciate you so much. Thank you so much for listening and sharing. If you enjoyed this episode, please share it. And I do have a new quiz. You may not have noticed in the show notes. I do have a new quiz for women, 35 and up, 40 and up, somewhere around there, called Your Grown Ass Power Quiz. And it outlines my passion buddy archetypes. And you'll learn which archetype you are most identified with, what the strengths are of that archetype, where you could apply some attention to be stronger, like where the typical pitfalls are, and the secrets that you need to master to be fully activated in your passion body, which is what I call the most true, essential part of us that knows what we want, that's not based on conditioning of what others have taught us to want, but that's actually true to us, our native soul level desires, and has the power to go get it. And especially in midlife as women, we want to activate that shit, because until then, we're mostly playing out patterns and conditioning that we were taught. And at some point, we'll hit the wall and it'll be like, oh my God, this isn't the life I wanted. Or, oh, I've been working so hard for this, but it's not fulfilling me. Like I've reached the mountaintop and I'm still not happy. Whatever your moment is, maybe it's I'm bored in my marriage and I don't know if I should end it. Whatever your wall is that you hit, that is an invitation from the deepest part of your being to go in and activate your passion body more deeply and allow that to guide you. Don't change anything on the outside yet. Go in. And so if you haven't yet taken my quiz, your grown-ass power quiz, go ahead and do that. And if you're a woman like 35 years old and up, go ahead and do that quiz and find out what your archetype is, because I've got lots of really cool new stuff coming down the pike for you with this passion body work. And until then, remember that a great relationship starts with you.